Hello and welcome back to Ion Radio. I'm Ken, and today we're going to go through the Cloak capability here from Star Trek Into the Unknown: Rising Tensions. So let's get to the board and understand how this works. For this particular example, we will be using the Klingon Burrell class Bird of Prey. So during the course of cloaking, the other important component that we're going to be using is the wake marker, shown here. This is going to provide an approximate position for the unit, in this case the Burrell, and all ranges and effects will be measured to and from the cloaked unit's wake marker. There are movement and attack restrictions, along with some changes to the stats, such as a reduced comms range and sensors range, and instrument power is dropped to 0. Let's take a look at the procedure on cloaking. In our example, the Burrell class Bird of Prey is showing the Cloak Ready indicator icon, which is located in the same ship display window as the Probe Ready and Torpedo Ready indicators. We are currently interested in cloaking our Bird of Prey. Since we are at an alert status that shows the Cloak Ready indicator, we can follow this procedure to cloak the ship. First, we will place the tracking marker. This tracking marker is put into the aft slot of the unit's base. As usual, we align the central notch to the center dot in the slot. The unit is then removed from the play area. The wake marker is placed with the aft slot aligning with the tracking marker. The tracking marker can then be removed. We then secretly set the unit's stealth tracker to indicate its actual position relative to the wake marker. Let's take a closer look at the stealth tracker now. When a unit activates its cloaking device, the unit's actual position is secretly recorded on this tracker using the 2 dials shown. One side of the tracker, the one shown, is kept face down while the unit is cloaked. This contains the exact direction and distance from the wake marker. The opposite side contains 2 telemetry windows. These can be revealed to provide limited information about the actual position of the cloaked ship. Distance and position can be partially understood by looking at the revealed telemetry information. In this instance, we know that the cloaked ship is in directions A or B, as shown in the position telemetry window, and within range 4 to 6, as shown in the distance telemetry window. When a unit does cloak, the player must set a radial position on the left-hand dial, selecting A through H, as well as a distance on the right-hand dial, selecting a distance between 1 and 6 inches. This will showcase the ship's true position and distance relative to the wake marker. Let's take a look at a slightly different example. The USS Defiant is looking to cloak. With the Romulan cloaking device installed, an officer at the helm can commit to a priority order to take the cloak action. Federation player will place the tracking marker, remove the Defiant, and place the wake marker in the ship's position. The tracking marker is then removed from the sector. Federation player must now decide on the ship's true position. Looking at the stealth tracker, we secretly select radial position H, and then distance 2 inches. The Federation player is now fully aware of the true position of the Defiant relative to the wake marker. The stealth tracker is now turned face down, placed near the ship guard, making sure that both of the windows are closed. The Defiant is now fully cloaked. The real position of the Defiant is now shown here, 2 inches away in direction H. While cloaked, A unit has a limitation to its moving capabilities. Although the wake marker is moved as if it was the cloaked unit, when a cloaked unit engages impulse, it may perform only the forward impulse or come about maneuvers. A cloaked unit can engage warp as normal. The wake marker can enter and leave systems in the same manner as any other warp-capable unit. It is worth noting that the wake marker's position can differ from the system the ship is in. There are a few restrictions and changes on what can happen when a unit is cloaked. A cloaked unit cannot perform an attack and cannot be declared the target of an attack. When a torpedo is within 12 inches of a wake marker and detonates or is removed due to having no endurance, the cloaked unit's owner must prove the unit's position. More on this later. A cloaked unit can launch a probe or auxiliary unit, provided this is not part of an attack. A cloaked unit can transport personnel by measuring from its wake marker. However, an opponent cannot transport personnel to a location in that cloaked unit. A cloaked unit's sensors and comm ranges are reduced to 2 inches. They cannot be increased. Instrument power stat on a cloaked unit is now reduced to 0. A cloaked unit can conduct and receive hails. Although, keep in mind, the unit does have a modified comms range of 2 inches. A cloaked unit is capable of performing a sensor lock onto another unit. However, when a unit does cloak, a sensor lock token placed on this unit is removed. A unit can decloak, but must decloak if it cannot prove its position beyond the range of an effect given the telemetry windows shown. It is possible for opponents to take actions to force the unit to prove its position. A common way to do this is launching photon torpedoes. All cloaked units have a ship ability present in one of its stations, allowing it to decloak. To decloak, a unit must follow this procedure. First, the stealth tracker is revealed. The unit's stealth tracker is turned over so that the true radial and distance positions are revealed to all players. In our example, the Defiant is cloaked at radial H at a distance of 2 inches. The ruler is placed on top of the wake marker with its starting end aligned with the letter indicated on the radial telemetry dial. The ruler is currently placed in the H radial. The unit is placed in such a way that the edge of the base is touching the ruler at the measured distance, in this case 2 inches. Proper orientation would have the ruler crossing the center mark or peg of the ship. The fore end of the ship must be oriented in the same direction as the wake marker's forward end. It is important that the unit is placed at a valid position entirely within the sector and where it is not overlapping or being overlapped by another unit with a ship base. In the event the unit's true position is not a valid position, the decloaking unit must move to the minimum distance required towards the wake marker. If it cannot be placed in a valid position along the radial line, the opponent will place the unit at a valid position of their choice. The wake marker is removed, and ranges are now checked to the ship's true position. If the unit decloaked outside of the system or the sector, the reserve dial is reduced to 0. If the unit had no reserve dial or the reserve dial already at 0, 3 peril tokens will be added to the unit. In order to help detect a cloaked unit, some ships are able to perform the detect cloak action. This will force the cloaked unit to reveal one of the telemetry windows. It is possible that a cloaked unit will be required to prove its true position is not in range of a particular effect. In this example, a photon torpedo and a possible detonation. If by revealing one or more telemetry windows on the back of the stealth tracker, you narrow the possible outcomes of where the cloaked unit resides, you can prove the current location of your ship. In this example, a cloaked bird of prey is being fired upon by the Federation, and they are looking to reveal the true position of the bird of prey. A torpedo has been launched towards the wake marker. Activating during the standby phase, it ends its movement at a distance from the wake marker, requiring that the position be proved. The Klingon player must prove that the position of its bird of prey is not at 1 inch of the torpedo. Unfortunately, the bird of prey is, in fact, within 1 inch of this torpedo. Revealing either of the stealth tracker's windows, the radial being H or the distance being 2 inches, will show that the bird of prey is in the quadrant and distance range of the torpedo. As the Klingon player cannot prove that it is out of range with either piece of information, they are required to flip the tracker and decloak the ship. The Klingon ship is decloaked. The torpedo is shown to be at 1 inch of the bird of prey. Therefore, it will detonate. The bird of prey will sustain damage as normal. Using the same example, let's assume the bird of prey is at a different location, radial E at distance 4 inches. The Klingon player could reveal its radial telemetry window, showing that it is in the magenta quadrant in radials E or F. This would prove that the torpedo is not within 1 inch of the bird of prey. The opposing player has now proven that the bird of prey's position would not be affected by the torpedo's detonation. The ship is then not required to decloak. All right, that's kind of the basic overview of how cloaking works in rising tension. Effectively, you're using two tools. You're using the wake marker and the stealth tracker, which gives you kind of some interesting information. You've got effectively 48 different locations that a cloaked ship could be. You have your 8 directions and then 6 inches worth of movement away from that. So you can kind of get pretty close, and the telemetry windows here will change based on where you have things. So depending on what quadrant you're in or the distance, so close or further away from the wake marker. All in all, it allows both players to kind of have like a sub-hunt type of mini game in here as you attempt to figure out where the cloaked ship is and force it to decloak. One unique advantage here with cloaking a ship is that you are able to effectively move the ship across the board and kind of give yourself some distance away from where you were and then decloak later. This could be potentially advantageous depending on where you need to position yourself within a system. The downside, of course, being that you are limited in your movement capabilities, pretty much moving forward or doing a turn on the spot with a come-about maneuver. However, you are still able to leverage your transporters and warp across the board into a different system contained within the sector. I'm currently interested to see how cloaking is going to work within the context of our games. John is a huge fan of firing photon torpedoes, and I fully suspect that he will continue to be the Federation in our next campaign series here for Rising Tensions. So I'm going to be taking on the Klingons and probably doing a little bit of cloaking. All right, everyone, I've got more Into the Unknown videos coming up, specifically targeting certain segments of how to play, including combat and some of the campaign materials. So stay tuned for more of those videos that we release here on Ion Radio, whether it's part of Rising Tensions or the Into the Unknown core game. Until next time, I'm Ken, and you're watching Ion Radio.